For 15 years, Bangladesh's government was viewed as a firm bulwark against religious extremism. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had cracked down heavily on the country's largest Islamist party, Jamaat-e-Islami, as well as various radical and jihadist outfits. Really, Hasina cracked down on everyone, but to some, her authoritarian bent was an acceptable price to pay to keep religious extremism under wraps. So, when Hasina's Awami League government was ousted from power on August 5, 2024, it triggered a wave of deep anxiety. Many feared that Islamists in Bangladesh would now have free reign. India especially was horrified by the prospect of its eastern neighbor becoming a safe haven for Islamist extremist groups, some of which might dream of carrying out terrorist attacks on Indian soil. Now, 2 years after the collapse of Hasina's government, Jamaat-e-Islami has made a spectacular return to parliamentary politics. Radical groups are mobilizing, and there are escalating attacks against religious minorities. Does that mean fears about Bangladesh's Islamist explosion have come true? Not exactly. Here's Shafi Mustafa, a longtime scholar of political Islam based at Dhaka University.
India was a bit more paranoid about the Islamist upsurge in the Bangladesh, and also the Awami League regime, they have securitized so much the Islamist militant issues. So that's why the global audience is also so paranoid about rise of Islamist and rise of Islamist extremist groups. This is so much exaggeration of the fact, and denial is also not the solution. The reality stands in between somewhere.
To those concerned about the rise of Islamism and potentially extremism and terrorism in Bangladesh, the first post-Hasina election was a mixed bag. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or BNP, secured 210 seats on its own, over two-thirds of the 300 directly elected seats in parliament. By comparison, Jamaat-e-Islami, the largest Islamist political party in Bangladesh, actually in all of South Asia, fell far short of the BNP's total. Jamaat captured 68 seats on its own, 77 with its coalition partners. Jamaat's alliance is composed of mostly, though not exclusively, Islamist parties. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to it later. If you were just looking at the top-line results, you may have missed Jamaat's surge. The party nearly quadrupled its previous vote share record.
Jamaat did not get the majority in the parliament. That's for sure. They have received only 68 out of 300 parliamentary seats. That looks very insignificant. And there is also the other side, like their alliance. They managed to get nearly 39% vote share in the parliamentary election. I mean, nobody ever thought of this sort of percentage. They have never got more than 10% together, all Islamist parties. So from there is a jump to the 39%. This is amazing. This is so surprising.
What led to Jamaat's surprising surge? And does it really mean what everyone seems to think it means? To understand the trends driving Islamism in Bangladesh, we have to look at the social fabric of the country. Demographically, it is a predominantly Muslim nation, with Sunnis making up 91% of the population. Hindus clock in at around 8%, alongside smaller communities of Buddhists and Christians. Historically, Bangladesh's atheists, secular Muslims, and Hindus have at times faced intense pressure and violence from Islamists. Even minority Muslim communities, Shias, Sufis, and Ahmadis, are often violently targeted by Sunni hardliners. Beyond religion, though, language and ethnicity serve as powerful identity markers in Bangladesh. The population is overwhelmingly Bengali, and national identity is deeply rooted in shared language, cultural practices, and social life. For most of history, these religious and linguistic identities coexisted comfortably, but the political contest between prioritizing faith versus language has often turned violent in the modern age. In 1947, during partition, religious identity won out. East Bengal joined the Islamic State of Pakistan, despite the physical distance between them. But in 1971, linguistic nationalism took over, culminating in a war that saw the former East Pakistan become an independent Bangladesh. And the Islamists, with their religious-based vision of national identity, were on the wrong side of that war. Jamaat-e-Islami especially was complicit in Pakistani military abuses against fellow Bangladeshis, a legacy that haunts the party to this day.
Jamaat has historically been suffering to get rid of the 1971 tag. They have those sort of allegations out there in society, like that they serve the purpose of the Pakistani army, even they were engaged in violent activities. So that's why they were charged with so many cases, human rights violation cases, and we know the dozens of their leaders were executed during the past Hasina regime.
The Liberation War of 1971 birthed an independent and explicitly secular Bangladesh. However, secularism remained largely an elite intellectual project. The idea failed to fully resonate with the masses. For most Bangladeshis, the Muslim faith remained central to their daily lives and identities. That's why so many of Bangladesh's past rulers projected themselves as patrons of Islam. It was a cheap way to stabilize their regimes after coming to power, especially for military leaders who seized control through coups. Take General Zia-ur-Rahman, who came to power following a quick succession of coups and counter-coups in 1975 and 1976. Almost immediately, he amended the constitution to remove secularism, inserting "in the name of Allah" into the preamble. He also lifted the ban on Jamaat-e-Islami, the first step in absolving the party of its horrific atrocities during the 1971 war. General Muhammad Ershad seized power after a coup of his own in 1982 and named himself president in 1983. He took the Islamization process even further. Ershad declared Islam the state religion in 1988. And it wasn't just military governments pushing Bangladesh away from secularism. The democratic parties also routinely pandered to Islamists to secure votes. From 2001 to 2006, the BNP led a coalition government that included Islamist parties. It was, in a way, savvy politics. The BNP handed cabinet ministries to Jamaat, allowing the party to expand its network. The BNP chose to incorporate Islamist forces into its political base, rather than reject them outright. And there were consequences. During this period, Islamist extremism surged in Bangladesh, and groups linked to al-Qaeda operated openly. In 2005, the jihadist group Jamaat-ul-Mujahideen Bangladesh, or JMB, orchestrated 459 coordinated bomb blasts across 63 out of Bangladesh's 64 districts in a single day. This history is what drives fears today. The BNP is back in power, and the Islamists are more empowered than ever before, even if there's no formal alliance between Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP government. Hasina's approach to Islamist movements was very different. After Hasina and her Awami League came to power in 2009, she reinstated secularism as a constitutional pillar. She also put Jamaat leaders on trial for war crimes. From 2013 to 2016, 5 of Jamaat's top leaders were executed for crimes against humanity committed during the 1971 Liberation War. But Hasina was playing politics too. Whereas the BNP attempted to co-opt forces like Jamaat in order to hold on to power, Hasina staunchly rejected them for pretty much the same reason. She wasn't acting out of an idealistic commitment to secularism or minority rights. After all, Hasina retained Islam as the state religion. Instead, she selectively targeted Islamists based on political convenience. They had been allied with her arch-rival BNP and therefore were also her enemies. To weaken Jamaat, Hasina tolerated and even appeased ultra-hardline groups like Jamaat-e-Islami. Her government bowed to Hifazat's demands by arresting secular bloggers, removing progressive content from school textbooks, and relocating a Lady Justice statue from the Supreme Court. Hasina used secular rhetoric primarily as a shield to secure support from foreign governments like India and the West, while engaging in clearly authoritarian behavior. The public increasingly viewed her secularism as a mask for autocracy. Her crackdown on certain expressions of Islamist identity, combined with Hasina's growing unpopularity, had many Bangladeshis primed to embrace Islamism the second the opportunity arose.
I would say it was Hasina that actually made Jamaat more popular, nearly executing people through a very controversial process. So when she did that, it got people's sympathy, So you see, this is the political dilemma. If you play with a political party, they get sometimes momentum. So this is what happened with Jamaat. It is the Sheikh Hasina who made Jamaat popular.
While it may have seemed that Hasina successfully crushed Bangladesh's Islamists, her crackdown merely pushed them underground. Operating below the radar, they quietly built online networks and recruited angry youth. When the massive student-led protests against Hasina erupted in mid-2024, Islamist groups seized the opportunity. Students provided the initial leadership, but Islamists brought the raw numbers and physical muscle that ultimately took down the Awami League regime. Jamaat, its student wing Chatra Shibir, and the radical transnational outfit Hizb ut-Tahrir all emerged from the movement empowered and reinvigorated. Following Hasina's exit, an interim administration under Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus took charge. But the sudden transition sparked a severe breakdown in law and order. Mobs targeted law enforcement, police fled their posts, armories were looted, and over 500 jailed militants escaped, including the Indian operations head of the extremist group Ansarullah Bangla Team, or ABT. Within weeks, the interim government lifted the terrorist designation on Jamaat and Chatra Shibir, allowing them to open offices and mobilize openly. Outlawed groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir held mass rallies calling for a caliphate in Dhaka. Whether due to weakness or political appeasement, the interim administration created a highly permissive environment, releasing notorious militant chiefs on parole and failing to prosecute those targeting religious minorities. Out of 97 documented attacks on Sufi shrines during this transition period, police registered complaints in only 11 cases, and virtually none showed progress. Some of this surge in radical Islamism is driven by political parties seizing an opportunity in a moment of chaos. But these politicians are tapping into a social and cultural phenomenon that stands on its own. In recent years, Bangladesh has seen a grassroots push to embrace Islam as a marker of identity. This trend is even more complex than Bangladesh's politics. It stems from a number of factors. There are 10 million Bangladeshis who have traveled to the Middle East for work, bringing home the Gulf's stricter version of Islam. The advent of social media has also brought more and more Bangladeshis into direct contact with Saudi-style Wahhabism, with its puritanical requirements for dress and behavior. But perhaps more than anything else, the turn to Islamism has been bolstered by the sad litany of headlines about Muslims being persecuted in other states. From the genocide of Rohingya Muslims right next door in Myanmar to the skyrocketing civilian death toll amid Israel's invasion of Gaza, Bangladeshis see their fellow Muslims being targeted around the world, and they fight back by embracing Islam more tightly themselves at home. It's young Bangladeshis who are most vocal about a more Islam-centered identity.
There are some social changes. The youth are increasingly adopting the religious identities. One of the reasons is the repeatedly attack on the Muslim identity. Like our youths are so paranoid about those events, especially the killing of the Palestinians. They see themselves victimized, marginalized in the current world order. I can see, even though they are not religious in the term of they are performing religious, but still they're holding them Islamic or Muslim identity strongly. So yes, I can clearly see that among the youths.
You can see this change in a literal sense. The number of women wearing the burqa has noticeably increased in Dhaka, and male university students have begun policing women's clothing. Even the secular Bengali New Year procession, the Mangala Shobhajatra, faced intense Islamist pressure over its Sanskrit name and Hindu connotations, forcing a renaming to the Boishakhi Shobhajatra, alongside attacks on traditional cultural organizations. Most troubling, attacks on religious minorities persisted even after the BNP came to power. Mobs continue to target Sufi shrines. In April 2026, a prominent Sufi spiritual leader was beaten to death by an Islamist mob in Kushtia. Some argue that the destruction of shrines and physical attacks on minorities are purely political retaliation against former Awami League supporters. There is some truth to that, but alongside the politics, very real harm is being done to Bangladesh's minorities. And this is where things get sticky, because when most people talk about being concerned by the rise of Islamist political parties, what they really mean is they're afraid of a rise in religiously motivated terrorism. The two are not the same, to be clear, but they do sometimes occur together. And when it comes to terrorism specifically, there are some warning signs in Bangladesh. Outfits like JMB and ABT are heavily recruiting online, and Hasina's ouster has renewed the interest of global terror networks like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. An Al-Qaeda pamphlet recently hailed Bangladesh as the rising hope for victory of Islam. Shortly after that, in April 2026, Bangladesh's National Police Headquarters issued official warnings regarding imminent terror attacks targeting parliament and mosques. But even today, the situation is a far cry from how bad it got in the mid-2010s. Back then, there was a surge in global terrorist networks in the Middle East, especially the rise of the Islamic State, which attracted Muslims from around the world to take up arms on its behalf in Iraq and Syria. That global trend impacted Bangladesh as well. The most deadly terrorist attack on Bangladeshi soil took place in 2016, during the height of the Islamic State's global influence, and under Hasina's watch. 5 heavily armed militants stormed the Holy Artisan Bakery, a popular restaurant in Dhaka, taking hostages. During a terrifying 12-hour standoff, 29 people were killed, including 20 civilian hostages, 17 of them foreigners, 2 police officers, the 5 terrorists, and 2 of the bakery's staff. It was a horrific warning. Even under Hasina's regime, with its hardline stance against Islamism, terrorism could break through. Since then, outright militancy and terrorism has declined in Bangladesh. That's partially due to Hasina's crackdown, but also due to a shift in the wider world order. After the Islamic State's so-called caliphate collapsed around 2017, so did its overseas terrorist networks, including in Bangladesh. Today, the dramatic rise of Islamist activity in post-Hasina Bangladesh is an undeniable reality, but that doesn't automatically mean an upsurge in violence is around the corner.
Sheikh Hasina regime has exaggerated the whole militant issues. That's why when you're talking about militancy, we need to talk very carefully so that people don't misunderstood Bangladesh as a whole. Those sort of narrative out there, and I can clearly see the signs of EOS getting radicalized. Again, the word radicalized is a very contested term. Radicalized does not mean being violent. So far, I don't see the possibility of massive scale operation becoming so violent. I don't see that. We can definitely see that there is online recruitment happening, and I can see from recent reports there are some activities out there, but still that should not be exaggerated.
Even if Bangladesh is seeing a rise in religious extremism, supporters of hardline Islamism remains a small minority of the total population. How small a minority is hard to gauge, but a close look at the behavior of Jamaat-e-Islami itself can give us a clue. Remember, Jamaat was massively successful in the 2026 election. It way outperformed all of its past voter totals. But how much of that shift is because Bangladeshis embraced Islamism, and how much is because Jamaat moved away from its past hardline positions? When Hasina fell, Jamaat's biggest political obstacle was suddenly gone. And the party took full advantage of the moment, not by leaning into its Islamist credentials, but by remaking itself. Jamaat carefully distanced itself from the atrocities of 1971, although it never actually apologized. It joined hands with secular and pro-independence figures, most notably the National Citizen Party, a youth-led party that emerged from the protest movement that drove Hasina from office. Although Jamaat's 11-party alliance is mostly composed of Islamist parties, it is not exclusively Islamist. Clearly, Jamaat saw the need to moderate its language and positioning on the political spectrum. Rather than loudly calling for Sharia law and an Islamic state ahead of the election, it did something else entirely.
Jamaat has transformed itself a lot. It's reinvented itself. They are no longer promoting a kind of Islamic state in their agenda. They have left that idea. Now they're provoking very much a leftist idea, a kind of welfare state. And the agendas are pretty much the economic agendas, establishing a sort of equality in society. Even during the last election, they never said they want to establish Islamic state. They want to establish Islamic welfare state. So it's totally different from the past. This is remarkable to me as I have been following Jamaat, and this is so remarkable difference even compared to the Muslim Brotherhood and compared to the other Islamist parties elsewhere. This is a completely different shape.
Whether Jamaat is sincere about embracing an economic agenda over a religious one is debatable. But it is notable that Bangladesh's largest Islamist party didn't think it could succeed in the election by leaning into an overtly Islamist agenda. This is a nuance worth tracking. There is even some speculation that Jamaat's vote total was artificially inflated by Awami League voters. Talk about irony. With the Awami League banned as a political party and therefore not listed on the ballot, its supporters may have voted for the party with the best chance to thwart their longtime rivals, the BNP. That would be Jamaat. Bangladesh's politics are complicated. But it's clear that since Hasina's ouster, the political landscape has shifted heavily to the right. It's hard to gauge how much support the most radical interpretations of Islam have. This isn't something people are always open and transparent about. But at the very least, the current BNP government remains highly hesitant to confront these more radical elements out of fear of political backlash from Jamaat and its base. Even so, Islamization in Bangladesh is not a foregone conclusion. The nation still possesses a resilient secular social fabric. The ultimate question is whether the current leadership can summon the political will to shift the country back toward the center. Bangladesh's political and social changes are being closely watched across the border in India. For more on the diplomatic fallout, check out our video on how India lost its influence in Bangladesh and whether the relationship can be fixed.